The translation software ran there. Laughter through 3 filters before it. Gave up and just played the raw sound. I will never forget that sound. It came through the speakers in our command bunker like wind chimes made of glass. Light and cold, and it meant the same thing in every language ever spoken. They were laughing at us. I stood at the back of the room with my arms crossed. Watching the big screen, 40 people sat at their stations in front of me, and every one of them had gone quiet. General Holt was up front near the main display, and his jaw was tight enough to crack a tooth. On the screen, frozen in a still image, was the face of the alien envoy. They called themselves the Concordance. The envoy's name, as close as our machines could pronounce it, was Vashan. Smooth gray skin, large dark eyes, a long neck. It looked gentle, almost kind, like something you would want to protect. That was the joke. They thought the same thing about us. Play it again, Holt said. The technician, a young woman named Grace, looked like she would rather do anything else, but she tapped her console, and Vessen's voice filled the room again. People of the 3rd planet, it said in that calm and patient tone they always used, we have completed our courtesy assessment of your defensive capabilities. We say this with no cruelty. We say it as friends. You have counted your strength wrong. Your fastest aircraft would not reach our lowest orbit. Your largest ships float on water. Your weapons throw small pieces of metal. We have measured everything you have built to defend yourselves, and it is brave, but it is nothing. You cannot win a war you do not understand, so we offer you mercy. Instead, the screen changed. It showed slow rotation of their fleet hanging above our world. There were hundreds of ships, long and pale, shaped like leaves. Each one was larger than any city we had ever built. The numbers along the bottom of the screen tried to measure their energy output and simply ran out of digits. Except protected status, Vashan continued. Lay down your arms. Allow us to guide you. In return, you will be safe. You will never again know hunger or sickness or fear. We have done this for many young species. They all thank us. In time, we ask only that you stop pretending you can stand against us. Pretending will only get you hurt. Then came the part that broke something in the room behind Vashan. You could hear the others, the crew of their ship, when the envoy reached the word pretending. They laughed, soft, musical, easy laughter, the laughter of people who have already won and find the losing side a little bit charming. Grace stopped the playback. The bunker was silent. I had been brought into this room 2 hours earlier, and in that time, nobody had told me why. I was not a general. I was not a scientist. My name is Owen Marsh, and on every record the Concordance could have scanned, I do not exist. There is a part of Earth's defense plan that was never written down, where outsiders could find it. There is a kind of person we do not talk about in public because talking about it would ruin the only advantage we have. I am that kind of person. I had been living quietly for 6 years, fixing engines in a town near the coast, waiting for a phone call I hoped would never come. For those 6 years, I had built a small, good life out of plain things. I knew the names of the people at the harbor. I knew which boats leaked and which ones the salt was. Slowly eating, I had a chair by a window where I drank my coffee in the morning and watched the gray water, and most days I almost believed I was just a man who fixed engines. That was the point of the quiet life. It was supposed to make me forget what I was until the exact moment the world needed it when Holt's people came for me that morning in a plain car with no markings. I had stood in my doorway for a long moment looking back at the chair by the window knowing I might never sit in it again. Hall turned around. He found me at the back of the room and his eyes settled on mine. You heard all of it? He asked. Every word, I said. And what do you think? Everyone in the room turned to look at me now. They did not know who I was. They saw a man in a plain gray jacket, no rank on his shoulders, standing where a janitor might stand. I could feel them wondering why the general was asking the opinion of a stranger. I think they did exactly what we hoped they would do, I said. Hall nodded slowly. Explain it to them. They need to hear it from you. So I walked to the front of the room. Grace stepped aside to let me pass. I stood next to the general under the giant frozen image of Vessen's gentle face, and I looked at the 40 frightened people who kept Earth's lights on. The Concordance scanned our planet for weeks before they spoke to us. I began. They are very thorough. They counted every tank, every plane, every ship, every missile. They added it all up, and they are not wrong. Compared to them, our army is weak. If this were a contest of machines, we would lose in an afternoon. A man, the front, an officer named Eli, spoke up. Then why does the general look like he just won the lottery? A few people laughed, a nervous, broken sound, nothing like the laughter from the ship. Because they made one mistake, I said. The same mistake everyone makes the first time they meet us. They looked at the things we built and they decided that was all we are. They counted our weapons. They forgot to look at the thing holding the weapons. I let that sit for a moment. There is a word in their language, I went on. It is hard to translate. The closest we have is death world to the Concordance. A death world is a planet so harsh that life should not be able to survive there. Most of the species in the galaxy come from soft worlds, gentle gravity, mild weather, no real predators, no ice ages, food that grows easily and waits patiently to be picked. They evolved without ever truly fighting for their lives. Their bodies never had to become weapons because nothing was ever trying to end them. Grace had stopped pretending to work. The whole room was leaning in now. They have a list of death worlds, I said. Planets they will not colonize because the ones who tried never came back. Earth is on that list. They put us there a long time ago from a distance, just from looking at our storms and our oceans and our gravity. They marked our planet as dangerous, but they never thought the danger could walk and talk and build cities. They assumed nothing intelligent could ever come from a place like this. They assumed wrong. What does that have to do with the war? Eli asked. Everything, I said. Their army is built for a soft galaxy. Their soldiers have never been truly hurt. They have never been cold or starving or hunted through the dark by something bigger than them. They have weapons that can break a planet, but they themselves have never had to become something terrible just to see the next sunrise. We have every one of us is the great-grandchild of people who should have died and refused to. That is what they did not measure. That is what is not on any of their charts. They counted our tanks. They did not count us. The room was very still. So, what happens now? Grace asked quietly. Hall answered before I could. Now we let them think they were right. He walked to the main console and brought up a different display. It showed the Concordance fleet and beneath it, our world, and along the surface of our world, the locations of our armies, our jets, our ships, our missile sites, every visible piece of our defense, glowing in soft blue. In 1 hour, Holt said, the government is going to send the Concordance a message. We are going to tell them we need time to think. We are going to sound scared. We are going to sound weak, because right now being weak is the smartest thing we can do. And while they wait for our answer, feeling generous and patient and pleased with themselves, we are going to send a different message down a channel they cannot read. He looked at me. 1 word. Holt said, we send 1 word to they people like Owen. People who were never on any list, never in any photograph, never in any file an alien could find. People we put away years ago, hoping we would never need them again. What is they word? Eli asked. Hall smiled. Activate. Felt it before he finished saying it. The small device clipped inside my jacket gave a single soft pulse against my chest. The first time it had moved in 6 years. I had almost forgotten it was there. I had spent a long time learning to forget. A quiet life by the coast, engines and salt air, and the sound of the tide. I had built a whole person around the hope that this pulse would never come. It came. I reached into my jacket and took out the device. It was small, no bigger than a coin, and it glowed faintly green. Everyone in the room watched me. They still did not fully understand what they were looking at. They knew the general respected me. They did not yet know why. Mr. Marsh, Grace said carefully, are you all right? I looked up at her. I looked at all of them, these brave, ordinary people who had spent the last hour terrified that our world was about to end. I wanted to tell them that everything would be fine, but that would have been a lie, and I do not lie to people I am about to fight beside. So instead I told them the truth. They think they have already won. I said they think the army they counted is the only thing we have. They're going to attack that army, and that army is going to lose exactly the way they expect. And while they are busy celebrating, the rest of us are going to wake up. I closed my hand around the green light. They laughed at our weak army. I said they have no idea that the army was never the part they should have been afraid of. Hall put a hand on my shoulder. Get your people ready, Owen. All of them. It is time. I nodded. I turned toward the door, and as I walked out of that bunker, away from the frightened faces and the gentle gray envoy frozen on the screen, I caught my own reflection in the dark glass of a dead monitor. I was smiling. It was not a happy smile. It was something older than that, something the Concordance had never seen, because nothing on their soft worlds had ever needed to smile that way. The technician nearest the door, a young man, saw the smile. He went pale. He took a small step back without even meaning to. Good, I thought. If a friend feels that, the enemy will feel it 100 times worse. The door opened. The cold night air of a death world rushed in to meet me, and somewhere out beyond the edge of the lights scattered across our harsh and beautiful and merciless planet, hundreds of devices just like mine were glowing green for the first time in years. Hundreds of people who had been hiding inside quiet, ordinary lives were lifting their heads at the exact same moment, feeling the same single pulse against their chests. We had been waiting a long time to be needed. The waiting was over. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what a death world actually does to the things that live on it because they. Concordance never did, they evolved on a planet that wanted them to live. We did not have that luxury. I spent the first day after my activation in a place that does not appear on any map. It is buried deep under a mountain far from any city. And it was built for exactly this moment. The people gathered there were, like me, there were 40 of us in that first room, and we had all lived the same kind of double life, a teacher, a nurse, a truck driver, a woman named Nora who, the day before, had been a baker in a small town and now stood beside me, checking equipment with hands that did not shake at all. I want you to understand how ordinary we looked, because that is the whole secret of us. If you had passed any one of us on the street the day before, you would have seen nothing worth a second glance. There was a grandmother in that room who had spent the morning 6 years earlier teaching children to read, and who had a green coin sewn into the lining of her coat. There was a man who repaired roofs, with sun on his face and rough, honest hands. There was a quiet woman who had been a librarian, who knew the name of every book she had ever shelved, and who could go 3 days without sleep and barely seemed to notice. None of us looked dangerous. That is the point. The Concordance had been searching the whole world for soldiers, for weapons, for they things that look like a threat. They had no way to search for a librarian or a roofer or a baker with steady hands. We were hidden in the one place they would never think to look, which is in plain sight, wearing the face of the most ordinary people alive. Before we did anything, a scientist named Dr. Lena Pierce called us together. She had spent her career studying the difference between us and them, and she wanted us to hear it once more before we went out, so that we would never forget why we were not afraid. I want to show you something, she said. She put 2 images side by side on the wall. On the left was a Concordance soldier taken from footage they had broadcast to us, proudly showing off their strength. The soldier was tall and graceful in a smooth silver suit, holding a weapon that glowed. On the right was a human being, just an ordinary person in ordinary clothes. Tell me what you see, she said. Nora answered, theirs looks stronger. It does, Dr. Pierce agreed. And in a fair contest of machines, it is, but there is no such thing as a fair contest, and a death world does not care what looks strong. Let me tell you the real difference between these two. She pointed at the Concordance soldier. This creature comes from a world with gentle gravity, about half of ours. Its bones are light. Its muscles never had to fight against weight. On our planet, just standing up all day would tire it out. Walking up a steep hill would leave it gasping. It has never been cold. Its life, because its world never froze. It has never been truly hungry because its world always had food. It has never been chased by something that wanted to eat it, because on its world nothing did. It feels pain, and when it feels pain, it stops. That is the smart thing to do. On a gentle world, pain means danger, and stopping keeps you alive. She moved her hand to the human. Now, this one comes from a world that has tried to kill it from the moment it was born. Heavy gravity, so its bones are dense and its heart is strong just from standing up. It survived ice ages when the whole world froze and food disappeared for years. It survived plagues that should have ended its entire kind. It survived predators that were faster and stronger and had teeth, and it survived them not by being faster or stronger, but by being patient and clever and impossible to discourage. She leaned forward. There is a thing our ancestors used to do that no other creature on our planet could do. They could not outrun a deer, they could not outrun almost anything, so instead they would simply follow it for hours, for a whole day if they had to. The animal would run and rest and run and rest, and every time it rested, the humans would appear again, walking, never stopping, never giving up, and eventually the animal could not run anymore. It was not strength that ended the hunt, it was the refusal to ever stop that is in us. That is what a death world built, not a faster body, a mind that does not know how to quit, attached to a body that can keep going long after it should have fallen. The room was silent. There is more, she said. Their hearing is good, but their bodies are not made to be still. They fidget, they make noise. On their world there was never anything to hide from, so they never learned silence. We learned silence before we learned to speak, because the things that hunted our ancestors had ears too. Their eyes are large and beautiful, but they are made for soft daylight. In the dark they are nearly blind. Our eyes are smaller, but they drink in the smallest light, because for most of our history we did our best work at dusk and at dawn and under the cold light of the moon, when it was safest to move. They sweat very little because they never had to chase anything, and so they cannot cool themselves in heat or work for long without resting. We sweat better than almost any animal that has ever lived. It is the strangest gift, and it is the reason our ancestors could follow a faster animal across open ground for a whole day in the sun and never fall behind. While the animal overheated and slowed, we stayed cool. And we kept walking, and we won. She paused and let the room sit with it. The concordance feels pain and stops, she went on. We feel pain and keep walking toward you. They get cold and become slow. We get cold and put on a coat. They get hungry and grow weak. We get hungry and grow angry. Everything that a soft world taught their bodies to do, our world taught our bodies to do the opposite, and the worst part for them is this: they think the word Deathworlder means we have some special weapon. It does not. It just means a normal human from a normal harsh planet doing the normal thing humans have always done. When something stronger tries to push us into the dirt, we do not lie down. We have never once in our entire history laying down. She turned off the images. That is your weapon, Dr. Pierce said. Not the equipment. You now go remind the galaxy what we are. When she finished, the room did not cheer. There was nothing to cheer about yet, but I watched the faces change while she spoke. They had walked into that room, afraid, every one of them, and they walked out of it standing a little straighter, because she had not given them a speech about being brave. She had simply reminded them of what they already were. One of the youngest, a man barely past 20 named Peter, came to me afterward while we were checking our gear. His hands were not as steady as Nora's. He looked at me with the open, frightened honesty of someone too young to have learned to hide it. Mr. Marsh, he said quietly, I am not like you. I have never done anything. A week ago I was studying for exams. I am scared. What if I freeze out there? What if I am the weak one? I sat down what I was holding and looked at him. I remembered being his age, the first time I felt this same pulse against my chest. Peter, I said, every person in this room is scared. The ones who tell you they are Not or lying, and you should not stand beside a liar. Being scared is not the weak part. Being scared and walking forward anyway is the whole thing. That is all a Deathworlder is. It is not a person without fear. It is a person who has decided that fear does not get to make the choices. I put my hand on his shoulder. You will not freeze, and if you do for 1 second, the rest of us will be right there, and we will not leave you. That is the other half of it. We are unkillable together in a way we never are alone. He swallowed and nodded, and some of the shaking left his hands. It did not all leave. It never does, but enough left that he could work while we prepared the war. The concordance expected was already happening above us, and it was going exactly as they had planned. I watched it on a screen as we suited up. Government had sent its scared message, asking for time. The concordance had answered the way patient teachers answer a stubborn child. They decided to give us a small, painless lesson. They would destroy our visible army, the one they had counted to show us that resistance was foolish. They were so sure it would be painless that they broadcast it openly, expecting us to watch and learn, and finally give up. Their ships came lower. Beams of light reached down from the sky, and our jets, the fastest machines we had ever built, fell out of the air. Our great ships on the water went dark and still. Our missile sights fired everything they had, and the missiles climbed and burst harmlessly against the pale leaf-shaped hulls without leaving a single mark. It was over in less than a day. The army Vess had measured was gone. Not many people were harmed because we had quietly emptied those bases first, but the machines were finished. On the screen, I watched the symbol of our visible defense go from blue to gray, piece by piece. It was a strange thing to watch. For all my life, those jets and ships had been the proud face of our strength. Children drew pictures of them. We held parades for them, and in a single day they were swept from the board as easily as a hand sweeps crumbs from a table. A part of me grieved for them, for the people who had built them and flown them and believed in them. But a colder, older part of me watched the blue turn to gray and felt nothing but a quiet satisfaction, because every machine that fell made the concordance little more certain that they had won. And certainty is the thing that makes a strong enemy careless. Dr. Pierce stood beside me for a moment, watching the same screen. They think this is the war, she said. They think this is the war. I agreed. They are about to learn that this was only the part of the war that could be measured. The other part cannot be measured. That is exactly why it works. In the command bunker far away, I knew Vesson was smiling its gentle smile. I knew the crew of their ship were laughing again. That same light and easy laughter. They thought the lesson was complete. They thought we would surrender now. Nora came and stood beside me, watching the last of our jets vanish from the screen. They look happy, she said. They are, I said. They think they just won the war. Did they? I shook my head. They won the part of the war we let them see. They beat the army. The army was never the thing that was going to beat them. She looked at me, and I saw in her face the same thing I had seen in the dead reflection in the bunker, that old quiet, patient look, the look of someone whose great-grandparents should have died and did not. When do we go? She asked. I checked the small green light on my device. It pulsed steadily now, a heartbeat that matched my own. Soon, I said they're going to spend the next few days celebrating. They will lower their guard, they will start landing soldiers on the surface to begin governing us because they believe the fighting is finished. They will spread out across our world into our forests and our mountains and our cold, dark places feeling safe. I turned away from the screen, and that I said is when we begin. Behind me, Dr. Pierce was handing out the last of the equipment. It was not glowing armor, it was not weapons that could break a planet, it was warm clothing and quiet boots and tools for moving through the dark without being seen. Simple things, Deathworld things. The kind of things you need when the planet itself is your ally and the enemy does not understand the ground he is standing on. I pulled on my coat. I felt the cold from the mountain stone, and I did not mind it because I had been cold before 1,000 times in 1,000 winters, going back further than memory. The Concordance had never been cold. They were about to learn what it does to people who have. I looked around the room at the 40 of us, bakers and nurses and truck drivers, every one of us perfectly ordinary, every one of us exactly what a death world makes when it spends 1,000,000 years trying to break something and fails. All right, I said. They counted our tanks, they counted our planes, they laughed at all of it. Now let us go introduce them to the part they forgot to count. Their soldiers were trained for ceremony. I was shaped by everything that ever tried to make a meal of my ancestors. We went out on the third night after the visible army fell. By then the Concordance had done exactly what I said they would do. They felt safe. They had landed soldiers all across our world, setting up neat silver outposts in our valleys and our forests, beginning the slow, gentle work of taking over a planet they believed was already beaten. They did not build walls, they did not dig in. Why would they? They had won. They were here to govern, not to fight. The fighting was over in their minds, and a soft world had never taught them to be careful. After a victory, there were 6 of us in my group. Nora the baker, a quiet older man named Walter who had once been a school teacher, a young woman named Grace, the same technician from the bunker who had asked to come because she could not stand to sit and watch, a man named Eli, the officer who had spoken up, and a fellow named Sam who almost never talked but who could move through a dark forest without breaking a single twig, and me. Our target was an outpost the Concordance had built in a high mountain forest. It was a beautiful place, cold and silent with deep snow and tall black trees. The Concordance had chosen it because it was scenic. I think they liked beautiful things. They had set up their silver domes in a clearing and posted soldiers around it. Soldiers in glowing suits with weapons that could turn metal to vapor. By their measure, the outpost was perfectly safe. Nothing on the planet could threaten it. They had not counted on the cold. We watched them for 2 days before we did anything. That is the first thing the Concordance did not understand about us. We are patient. Patience is the oldest death world skill there is. The animals on our world were faster than our ancestors, so our ancestors learned to wait and watch and choose the perfect moment. We sat in the snow on the ridge above the outpost, wrapped in warm clothing, perfectly still, and we simply watched, and what we saw told us everything. The Concordance soldiers hated the cold. They were not built for it. Their gentle world had never frozen, so their bodies had no idea what to do with a mount in winter. We watched them grow slow as the temperature dropped. Each night, we watched them huddle near the warm domes, reluctant to walk there. Patrols cutting their rounds short to hurry back to the heat. We watched their glowing suits work harder and harder, just to keep them alive in weather that, to us, was simply a cold night. By the second evening, half of them had stopped going out into the dark at all. The dark was ours now. They had given it to us. Without even knowing, there was one bad moment on that second night. A single soldier, braver or more dutiful than the rest, came up the ridge on a patrol. It clearly did not want to walk. It came closer than any of them had come, its glowing suit casting a pale circle on the snow, its weapon held ready. For a few long breaths, it stood no more than 20 steps from where the 6 of us lay, buried in the white, perfectly still. Our breath slowed to almost nothing. I could feel Grace beside me, holding herself rigid. I could see the Sauters's large dark eyes sweeping the slope, looking right at us and seeing nothing, because its eyes were made for soft daylight, and the night gave us back to it as empty snow and shadow. It was so close I could hear the small, frightened sounds it made to itself in the cold. Then it turned, eager to be back near the warmth, and it walked away down the ridge, and it never knew that for half a minute it had been standing inside the reach of 6 people who had decided to take everything it was guarding. That is the gift the dark gives us. We are patient enough to let the danger walk right up to us, and still enough to let it walk away again, and we choose the moment always ourselves. That was close. Grace breathed when it was gone. No, I said softly, that was never close. It could not see us. It was never going to see us. To us, that was just a cold animal walking past in the dark, the way the deer used to walk past our ancestors, who were lying just as still, waiting just as patiently. 100,000 years ago, they are afraid of the night, Grace whispered, lying beside me in the snow. They are afraid of being cold, I said. On their world, being cold meant something had gone terribly wrong. To them, this whole forest feels like a place where everything has gone wrong. They want to be inside near the warmth, where it feels safe, and we want them outside, Nora said. I nodded. So we are going to make outside the only place they can be. We did not attack the outpost. That is the second thing they never understood. A Deathworlder does not run at a strong enemy and trade blows. Our ancestors who did that did not become our ancestors. Instead, we work on the thing the enemy depends on, the way our great-grandparents worked on a strong animal until it was no longer strong. The outpost depended on its warm domes. The warm domes depended on their power. On the third night, when the cold was deepest and the patrols had pulled all the way back to the heat, Sam and I went down the ridge in the dark. We did not make a sound. We had learned to move quietly in forests like this since we were children, because the forests of a Deathworld are full of things that listen. The Concordance had never learned that, because nothing on their world had ever needed to hide. We reached the edge of the clearing. The power lines ran from a generator at the back of the camp to the domes. It was not protected. Why would it be? They were safe. We did not break it. Breaking it would have made noise and warning. Instead, very carefully, we loosened it, just enough that in the deep cold, it would slowly fail on its own, the way pipes fail in winter, the way everything fragile fails in winter. Then we slipped back up the ridge and waited. We waited The rest of the night, we watched our breath rise in the freezing air, and we did not complain, because complaining about the cold is something only people who fear it do. Just before dawn, the warm domes went dark. We heard them before we saw them. The concordance soldiers came pouring out of the cold domes, confused, their gentle voices high and frightened in the dark. Their suits, no longer charged from the domes, were running only on their own small power, which would not last. They had no idea why their warmth had failed. They had never lived through a winter. They did not know that cold finds every weakness and pries it open. They milled about in the clearing, calling to each other, trying to understand what had gone wrong, and growing slower with every minute, because the deep cold was reaching into them now, and their bodies had no defense against it. We did not harm them. I want to be very clear about that, because it matters, and because it is the part the concordance found most frightening of all. We came down from the ridge, the six of us, warm and rested and unhurried, and we walked into their camp while they shivered and stumbled. We did not need weapons that turned metal to vapor. We did not need glowing suits. We simply walked up to soldiers who could barely move, who were cold for the first time in their lives and did not understand it, and we offered them a choice: come with us into the warmth we control, or stay here in the dark with the cold we command. Every one of them chose the warmth, every single one, because a creature from a soft world faced with a death world, winter will always choose to live. By the time the sun rose, the outpost belonged to us, and not one shot had been fired. I remember standing in the middle of that captured clearing as the light came up over the black trees, watching our breath and theirs rise together in the freezing air, and feeling how strange the quiet was. There had been no battle. There were no broken machines, no fire. None of the things the word war is supposed to mean. There was only a circle of cold, frightened soldiers, wrapped in our blankets, and six tired, ordinary people who had simply outlasted them. If you had wandered into that clearing knowing nothing, you might have thought you were looking at a rescue rather than a defeat. In a way, you would have been right about both. Walter, the old school teacher, looked at the captured soldiers wrapped in our spare blankets, drinking the warm drink we had given them, staring at us with their large dark eyes full of a fear they had never felt before. They have no idea what just happened to them, he said quietly. No, I agreed. They thought a battle was loud. They thought it was machines and light and noise. They never imagined they could lose a war to the weather and a few patient people in warm coats. One of the captured soldiers, an officer, kept watching me. I could tell it was an officer by the markings on its suit. It was older than the others, calmer, and there was something in its eyes that was thinking hard, trying to make sense of us. After a while, it spoke in the careful translated voice we had heard from Vashon. You did not destroy us, it said. You had the chance. We were helpless. Why? I crouched down so we were at the same level. What is your name? I asked. Terrell, it said. Terrell, I said. We did not destroy you because we did not need to. You are more useful to us alive and afraid than gone and forgotten. When your people come looking for this outpost, they will find you, and you will tell them the truth. You will tell them that we walked in out of the cold and took it without a fight, and that there was nothing you could do, and that you did not even understand how it happened. That story will spread Faster than any weapon, fear of the dark. Spreads on its own, we are just helping it along. Terrell stared at me. Your envoy told us you were a young species. Primitive, brave, but harmless. We are brave, I said, but you have the rest of it wrong. Why did you not surrender? Terrell asked, and there was real confusion in its voice, almost pain. When we destroyed your army, when you saw our fleet, you were so far below us. Any reasonable people would have surrendered. It was the only sensible choice. Why did you not take it? I thought about how to answer that. It is hard to explain to someone from a soft world. They truly do not understand it. To them, surrender when you are outmatched is just common sense. It is what their whole gentle history taught them. The strong rule, the weak submit. Everyone stays safe on your world, I said slowly. When something stronger than you appears, the smart thing is to give up, because giving up keeps you alive. Yes, Terrell said, of course. On our world it is the opposite, I said. On our world, the things that gave up got eaten. For 1,000,000 years only the ones who refused to surrender survived. To have children, every single one of us is descended from people who, when faced with something stronger, did not lie down. Clear's throat. They could not win, and they fought anyway, and somehow, often enough, they found a way through. The ones who surrendered are not our ancestors. They left no children. Refusing to give up is not a choice for us, Terrell. It is built into us, the way being afraid of the cold is built into you. We could no more surrender to you than you could enjoy this winter. It is simply not in us. Terrell was quiet for a long time. The other soldiers watched us. The sun climbed over the cold black trees. Your envoy laughed at us. I went on. We heard it. The whole crew of your ship laughed. When they offered us mercy, they thought we were charming, a weak little species pretending to be strong. I want you to understand something, Terrell. We are not pretending. We have never once in our entire long and difficult history been pretending. You looked at a death world and saw a planet too dangerous to colonize. You should have asked yourselves one question. If the planet is too dangerous to land on, what does that make the things that grew up there? Terrell's large eyes were very still. It makes them dangerous too, it said quietly. Yes, I said, and now you are the first of your people to truly understand that you will not be the last. We held the outpost for 3 more days, and in those 3 days the story did exactly what I knew it would do. Other groups like mine scattered across the cold places of our world were doing the same thing in their own ways. Some used the cold, some used the mountains, where the thin air left the concordant soldiers gasping while we breathed easily because our hearts were built strong by heavy gravity. Some used the deep forests where the gentle aliens became lost and frightened in the dark, while we moved through it like it was home, because it was home. The reports came into us each night, carried down the channel. The concordance could not read, and reading them was like hearing one story told 100 different ways. In the far north, a group led by a woman named Claire had simply waited beside a frozen river, and when the soldiers grew too cold to hold their post, they abandoned it on their own, and Claire's people took it without ever being seen. In the high desert, a man named Henry and his team let the daytime heat do the work the cold did for us, because the concordance could not cool their bodies and could not labor long under the open sun, and by midday the outpost there was Theirs, in the great wet forests near the middle of the world where the air is thick and the trees never end. Group moved through the green dark for 3 days alongside a patrol that never once realized it was being followed until the patrol was so lost and so worn down that it was almost grateful to be found. Every story was different, every story was the same. In all of them, the land itself was on our side, and the people simply knew how to listen to it. None of us fought the way the Concordants expected a war to be fought. We did not meet them strength against strength. We did what our ancestors always did against something stronger. We were patient. We were clever. We used the land itself, the harsh and merciless land that had spent 1,000,000 years trying to break us in. Instead, made us into the only thing on the planet it could not break, and everywhere we went, we left survivors. That was the plan. We left soldiers like Terrell alive and shaken to carry the story upward to their fleet. We wanted them to talk. We wanted them to tell the others what they had seen, because the Concordants had a weapon we did not have, all those ships and all that light, but we had a weapon they did not have either, and ours was far older and far harder to stop. We had fear, real fear, the kind that gets into a creature and never leaves, the kind a soft world had never taught them to feel. By the end of the week, the gentle laughter from their ships had stopped. The reports were reaching them now, the neat silver outposts going quiet in the night, the patrols that walked into the dark and came back changed, talking of people who appeared out of the cold and could not be frightened and would not stop. The pity they had felt for us was turning into something else, something they had no word for, because their kind had not needed such a word in 1,000 years. Up in the command bunker, General Holt sent me a single message down the channel the Concordants could not read. It said, "They are not laughing anymore." I read it standing in the captured outpost in the cold. I did not fear, surrounded by the quiet, ordinary people of a world that does not know how to surrender. No, I said to no one. They are not, and they are about to laugh even less. They sent their fleet to break our world. Our world has been trying to break us since the day we were born, and it never managed it. Their fleet did no better. When the reports from the surface finally reached Vashon and the leaders of the Concordants, they did the thing that frightened people often do. They decided the problem was that they had been too gentle. They had offered us mercy, and we had answered with the dark and the cold, and so they concluded that the only solution was to stop being kind and simply remove us. They would not land more soldiers to be swallowed by our forests. They would end the matter from above, where we could not reach them. The fleet moved lower from the ground all across the world. People looked up and saw the pale leaf-shaped ships fill the sky from edge to edge, blotting out the light. Beams came down, not at our armies this time, because our armies were already gone, but at our cities, at the open land, at everything. They meant to make our world too broken to fight on. They did not understand the world they were trying to break. I was back in the deep bunker by then, brought in from the field because the war had changed shape, and the people like me were needed to plan the next part. I stood beside General Holt and watched the ships pour their light down onto our planet, and I watched our planet take it, because here is the thing about a death world. It is already broken over and over, and it always comes back. Our world has been struck by rocks from Space large enough to darken the sky for years. It has frozen solid almost from pole to pole. It has burned and flooded and shaken itself apart more times than we can count. Whole kinds of life have ended on our world again and again, and every single time life came back. Because on a death world, the only living things that survive at all are the ones that are nearly impossible to finish off. The Concordance was trying to break a planet whose entire history was a long story of being broken and refusing to stay broken. They were throwing their worst at the one place in the galaxy most practiced at surviving the worst. I stood beside Hall and watched the numbers on the screen, the numbers that measured how much of their enormous power the Concordance was spending, and I watched those numbers climb and climb while the little symbol of our world stayed exactly where it was. They poured down everything. They lit the sky from horizon to horizon, and our planet, which had swallowed fire from the sky before, which had been frozen and burned and drowned and shaken more times than any of them could imagine, simply took it and remained. There is a strange comfort in standing on something that cannot be destroyed. The Concordance had spent their whole history on a world that asked nothing of them, and so they had never felt that comfort, never once stood on ground that had survived the end of the world and come back greener than before. We had felt it our whole lives. It is why we do not panic. It is why, while the sky burned, the people in the deep places below played cards and told their children stories and waited, calm as stone, for the storm above to spend itself out. We had emptied the cities long before. We had learned over a million years how to scatter, how to hide, how to go underground and wait. Our people were already deep in the mountains, in the caves, in the cold places the aliens feared. The light came down on empty streets. It struck land we had already left, and our world, ancient and patient and unkillable, simply endured it the way it had endured everything else. After a full day of trying to break us from the sky, the Concordance had spent an enormous amount of their power, and we were still here, still hidden, still refusing. That was when we made our real move, not on the ground up. It was Grace who first realized the opening. She had stayed in the bunker after the field operations, working the systems, and she came to me with a tired, fierce look on her face. Their ships are built for a crew that has never been in a real fight, she said. Look at them, wide open inside, no tight spaces, no defenses against someone getting in close. They have never had to defend the inside of a ship because no one has ever boarded one. They cannot even imagine it. Their whole design assumes that if you have the bigger fleet, you have already won and the fight is over. Like everything else about them, I said. Built for a galaxy where strength is the only thing that matters, and the fight ends when the strong side shows up. Exactly, Grace said. So what happens if the fight does not end? What happens if we get inside? We had a small number of craft, old things, slow things, nothing that could win a battle in open space against the leaf-shaped ships, but they did not need to win a battle. They needed to get close, just close enough, while the Concordance was busy spending its power on our patient, unbreakable planet below. And the Concordance, so sure that no one could ever board a ship, had left the door open without even knowing there was a door. I went up myself with 20 others, including Nora and Sam and Walter and Eli. Grace stayed below to guide us. We crossed the dark cold of space in our small slow craft, and the great fleet did not even notice us because in all their long gentle history, no one had ever been bold enough or strange enough to come knocking. That crossing was the longest few hours of my life. Our craft were old, patched, built for short hops. Never meant for this. We rode in the dark with the lights off, the cold of space pressing against the thin walls. And we did not speak above a whisper, as if the enemy could somehow hear us. Across the empty distance, below us, our world turned blue and white and patient, taking the fleet's punishment and giving nothing back. Above us, the great pale ships grew larger and larger until one of them filled the whole sky. Nora sat across from me with her eyes closed, her lips moving slightly, and I do not know if she was praying or simply counting her own breaths to stay calm. Walter, the old school teacher, kept his hands folded in his lap and watched the approaching hull with the same quiet attention he must once have given a difficult student. None of us showed our fear. We had all learned long ago that fear shared out loud spreads like cold through a room, and that fear held quietly inside can be carried a very long way without slowing you down. We slipped up against the underside of the largest ship, the command vessel, the one where Vesson itself directed the fleet, and we made our way inside. There was a long moment at the door where Sam worked in the dark, and the rest of us waited, knowing that if they noticed us now in the open against the hull, there would be nothing we could do. The second stretched out, then the way opened and the warm light of the inside spilled out toward us, and we went in one by one into the heart of the thing that had come to break our world. What I remember most is how unprepared they were, not weak. Their soldiers were tall and quick, and their weapons were terrible, but they had no idea how to defend a space. Their ship was built like a beautiful museum, all open halls and gentle curves and soft light, a place that had never imagined an enemy walking its corridors. We knew how to use such a place. We had spent 1,000,000 years learning to fight in caves and forests and tight dark spaces against things bigger than us. Close quarters was not their home. It was ours. I will not describe the details because the details are not the point, and there are things from that day I would rather not say aloud. What matters is this: we moved through their command ship the way our ancestors moved through the dark forests of home, patient and quiet and impossible to discourage, and the crew, who had never once been afraid in their lives, learned fear in a single hour. They did not understand how we kept coming. We were so far below them. We should have been helpless, and yet we kept coming down. Clear's throat, every hall, through every door, never stopping, never slowing, exactly the way our great-grandparents had once followed a stronger animal until it simply could not run anymore. We took the command ship. We did not destroy it. We could have, but I had a better idea, and the better idea was the whole reason we had come. We found Vashon on the main bridge, surrounded by its officers, all of them with their large dark eyes wide and their gentle hands raised, the same envoy that had offered us mercy, the same voice that had laughed. I walked up to it. I was tired and cold, and my coat was torn, and I had been awake for a very long time, and I had come a very long way from a quiet town by the coast. "Do you remember me?" I asked. "No, of course you do not. You never saw me. I was not in any of your photographs. I was not on any of your lists. You scanned our whole world and you never found me because the part of us that matters is the part you do not know how to look for. Vashan stared. Its gentle voice when it finally came was small and shaking. You cannot win this war, it said. We have hundreds of ships. We have power you cannot imagine. Even if you have taken this one vessel, we will. I am not here to win the war, I said. The war is already over. You just have not realized it yet. I am here to send you home. Vashan blinked its large eyes. Home, this ship, I said, and you and your crew are going to leave our world right now. And you are going to carry a message back to whoever sent you, and to every other species in your concordance, and to anyone in this whole galaxy who ever thinks about looking at our planet and laughing. I leaned close to it. Tell them about the death world, I said quietly. Tell them about the planet too dangerous to land on, and tell them what we did to the fleet that came to break it. Tell them that you came here with hundreds of ships and the power to crack a world, and you were sent home by a baker, a school teacher, and a man who used to fix engines by the sea. Tell them everything, leave nothing out, and then tell them the only thing that matters. Vashan waited, trembling. Leave us alone, I said. Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. Come back, and the rest of us will wake up, and there are so many more of us than you ever counted. We did not even use the worst of what we are. We did not need to. We beat your entire fleet with patience and the cold and the simple refusal to lie down. Imagine what we have left in reserve. Then imagine never finding out. Choose the second one. We let them go. We walked off that command ship and back into our small, slow craft, and we let the great vessel limp away, carrying Vashan and its terrified crew and the message that would spread to every corner of the galaxy faster than any weapon ever could. I watched it go from the window of our little craft as we fell back toward home. That enormous pale ship built to break worlds, drifting away, wounded not by any weapon we owned, but by 20 ordinary people who had refused to understand that they were beaten. None of us cheered. We were too tired, and there was nothing in us that wanted to cheer. Nara reached over and took my hand for a moment, and neither of us said anything, and that was enough. Below us, our world turned, scarred and patient and free, and the great enemy fleet hung above it like a held breath, waiting to learn what their command ship would tell them. The rest of the fleet watching their command ship come home broken, and their envoy come home shaking, did the only thing that made sense to people who had never lost. They stopped. They held in orbit silent while Vesson told them what had happened. And then slowly, over the following days, the great pale ships began to pull away from our world. In the bunker, Grace watched them go on. The big screen, the same screen where Ves had once laughed at us. They are leaving, she said, hardly believing it. They are, I said, just like that. Not just like that, I said. We made them leave. We made them more afraid of staying than of going. That is the only way anything ever leaves a death world. You do not ask it to go, you make the leaving the smarter choice. Holt came and stood beside me, watching the last of the fleet shrink into the dark. There will be records, he said, other species watching all of this from far away. They will be updating their files on us right now. Good, I said, let them update. Let every one of them change the word they use for Earth. We were a client, a weak little world to be protected and guided. Let them cross that out. Let them write the new word. And what word is that, Hal? Asked. I watched the gentle, terrible, beautiful enemy fleet vanish from the sky of the only world that had ever been hard enough to make something like me. Do not provoke, I said. Let that be the word. Do not provoke. Leave them alone. The first time the galaxy met us, it learned that humanity was weak. The second time, it learned that it had not been listening. The first time, the concordance withdrew completely within the month. They did not come back. In the quiet that followed, something strange happened, something none of us had expected. Other species began to speak to us. Not the concordants, who were too ashamed, but others who had been watching from a distance the whole time. They sent careful, polite messages, and in every message there was the same thing underneath the words: respect mixed with a kind of fear. They did not want to admit to. They had seen what we did to a fleet that came to break us, and they had quietly decided that Earth was not a world to be pushed. We signed an accord in the end. It was a strange document. The concordants paid us reparations for the damage they had done, and they accepted a single condition that they found almost impossible to understand. The condition was that no one would ever again ask us how we did it. We would keep the true nature of our defense undeclared. We would never explain in any record they could read exactly what a Deathworlder is, or how we are activated, or how many of us are sleeping inside quiet, ordinary lives. They agreed because the not knowing frightened them more than any answer could. A galaxy full of gentle species decided together that the safest thing was to simply leave the dangerous little world alone and never look at it too closely again. I was in the room when the accord was signed, standing at the back the way I had stood at the back of the bunker on the first day. The concordance sent a new envoy, not Vashan. Vashan was never seen in public again after it carried its message home. The new envoy was younger, and it could barely look at us. It read the terms in its careful translated voice, and when it reached the condition about never asking how, its hands trembled, and it did not argue. It signed quickly, the way you sign a thing you want to be finished with. When it was done, it looked up at the human leaders across the table, and then, almost against its will, its large dark eyes drifted to the back of the room, to me, the man with no rank and no name on any of their lists. I do not think it knew who I was. I think it simply felt something. Way the young technician in the bunker had felt something on that first day. It looked at me for 1 second, and then it looked away and would not look back, and I understood that the war was truly over, because the enemy had finally learned to be afraid of the right thing. I went home after that, back to the town by the coast, back to the engines and the salt air and the sound of the tide. I took off the coat I had worn into the cold mountains and the dark forests and the open halls of an alien command ship, and I hung it in a closet, and I tried to become an ordinary man again. It is harder than it sounds. There are things I carry now that I did not carry before. I think about the cold soldiers in the mountain outpost, shivering and confused, and how easy it was to take their warmth from them, and how easy it would have been to do worse. I think about Terrell, the officer who asked me why we did not surrender, and I wonder if it ever truly understood the answer. I think about the inside of that command ship, the parts of the day I do not say aloud, and some nights I do not sleep Well, because winning on a death world is never clean. We did what we had to do, and I would do it again to keep our world free, but doing what you have to do leaves a mark, and the mark does not fade just because you were right. I have thought a great deal in the quiet years since about what it means to be the thing we are. It is not a comfortable thing to be. The concordance came to us, soft and gentle with no real cruelty in them, truly believing they were offering kindness, and we answered them with the dark and the cold and the patient refusal to lie down, and we won, and the winning was right, and still I find no clean joy in it. There is a difference between the strength that wants to crush and the strength that only wants to be left alone, and I have tried in my own small way to stay on the right side of that line. It is not always easy. The same thing that let us save our world is the thing that could let us do terrible things if we ever decided to. That is the quiet weight every Deathworlder carries home. We are not dangerous because we wish anyone harm. We are dangerous because we do not stop, and a thing that does not stop must be very, very careful about what it chooses to walk toward. Nora went back to her bakery. Walter went back to teaching, though he told me once that he could never look at his students quite the same way again, knowing what ordinary people are capable of when something tries to push them into the dirt. Grace stayed in the service. Sam disappeared back into whatever quiet life he had come from, the way he had always seemed, half vanished, even when he was standing right beside you. Eli writes to me, sometimes we do not talk about the war, we talk about small things, the weather and the tide, and underneath the small things there is the thing we both know and never say. We are still here. That is what matters. That is what it was all for. The lights of our cities still burn at night, and our children still grow up under a sky we kept free. And most of them will never know how close it came, or what it cost, or who paid it. That is right. That is how it should be. The whole point of standing in the dark is so that other people can live in the light and never have to know about the dark at all. Years passed. I grew older. The device that had glowed green inside my jacket sat silent in a drawer, and slowly I let myself believe it would stay silent forever. The galaxy left us alone just as we had asked. Word had spread, do not provoke, leave them alone. And then a long time later, I heard a story that made me smile in the old way, the way that frightens people, the way nothing on a soft world ever needed to smile. A new species had appeared at the edge of the galaxy. Young, ambitious, strong, they came from a gentle world like most do, and they had built a great fleet like most do. And they had begun to look around at the other worlds and decide which ones were weak enough to push. They were thorough. They scanned and measured and counted the way the concordance once had, and eventually their scans reached our quiet little world far out on the edge of things. I heard about this from Hall, who was very old by then, retired like me, but still connected to the channels that listened. He came to visit me at the coast, and we sat watching the tide. Two old men who had once held back the sky, and he told me what had happened. It was good to see him. We did not see each other often. When you have shared a thing like that, you do not need to. He looked smaller than I remembered, the way old men do, but his eyes were the same, and when he sat down in the chair beside mine and looked out at the gray water, I felt the years fall away. Between us, we had not spoken of the war in a long time. We did not really speak of it now. He just sat with me for a while watching the boats, and then he said almost casually that something had happened out at the edge of the galaxy that he thought I would want to hear. And then he told me the new species had found Earth. They had counted what we let them see, our modest fleet, our quiet defenses, the small and gentle face we show the galaxy, and they had done exactly what the Concordance once did. They had measured us against their strength, and they had decided we were weak, and they had begun, in their gentle, ambitious way, to smile. Told me that for a few days it had hung in the balance. The new species had moved a portion of their fleet toward our edge of the galaxy. They had run their scans again and again, certain they had found an easy world down in the deep places. The people who still listened to the old channels had felt the device stir for the first time in years. Word had gone out very quietly to a handful of people living their quiet, ordinary lives: a nurse in one city, a farmer in another, a retired engineer by the sea who kept a silent green coin in a drawer, not an order, just a whisper. Be ready, it may be time again. For 3 days, the whole hidden strength of our world had held its breath, waiting to see whether it would have to wake. And then the old watcher had spoken, and the whole thing turned on a single quiet word from someone who remembered. But there was an older species nearby, Concordance attaché posted to watch that part of the galaxy, who had been alive long enough to remember. And when this old watcher saw the new species turning toward Earth with that hungry, amused, pitying look, the look of someone who has counted your tanks and found them small, the watcher did something that surprised everyone around. It reached out very gently, and it stopped them. Hall told me they have a recording of what the old watcher said. The translation is not perfect, but it is close enough. The new species had pointed at our world and asked in the careless way of the strong why such a weak little planet was allowed to remain undisturbed, when surely it would be easy to bring it under their guidance. And the old Concordance watcher, who had been alive in the days when its own people came to our world to laugh, answered them very quietly. It said, do not just that, do not. And when the young strong species laughed the way the young and strong always laugh, the old watcher did not laugh with them. It only looked at them with its large dark eyes, eyes that had seen something a long time ago that it had never been able to forget. And it said the rest of it slowly, so there could be no mistake. It said, you have counted their strength wrong. Everyone counts their strength wrong the first time. You see a small fleet and a gentle face, and you think that is all they are. We thought so too, once we came with hundreds of ships and the power to break a world, and we laughed at them exactly as you are laughing now, and they sent us home broken, and they never even showed us the worst of what they were. You see, a weak little planet. I am telling you that the planet is the part they let you see. The rest of them is still down. They're sleeping inside ordinary lives, waiting to be woken. Do not wake them. Leave them alone and live. That is all I have to teach you. Leave them alone. Holt said. The recording goes a little further. The young species, still not quite believing, had asked the old watcher how it could be so certain. How could a small world, a gentle face, hold such a thing inside it? And the watcher had answered with a question of its own. It had asked them to look again at the scans, at the world itself, and to tell it honestly whether they would choose to Land there, the storms, the cold seas, the heavy pull of the ground, the fierce weather that never rested, and the young species had admitted after a moment that no, they would not land there. The planet was too harsh, it was not safe. And the old watcher had said very quietly, then you already understand. You have already decided the planet is too dangerous to set foot on, now finish. The thought, whatever grew up on a world too dangerous for you to touch, did not grow up gentle, it grew up to match the world, and the world is merciless. Do not mistake their quiet for weakness. Their quiet is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy because it means they have chosen for now to leave you alone, do nothing to make them choose otherwise. Hold. Finished the story, and we sat for a while in the quiet, listening to the tide come in. They left, he said. At last the new ones, they turned their fleet around and they went somewhere else. They never came near us. The word hell, do not provoke. We were quiet again for a while. A boat came in across the gray water, low and slow, its engine making the rough sound I had spent so many years learning to fix. I watched it find its way to the harbor. Do you ever wish they knew? Hall asked. The new ones, the people in the cities, anyone. Do you wish they knew what we did, what it took, who paid for it? I thought about that for a long time before I answered. The truth is that there is a small, tired part of every person who stands in the dark that wishes just once to be seen, to have someone say, it was you held back the sky and asked for nothing. That part of me has never fully gone quiet. No, I said at last, and I found that I meant it. If they knew it would change them, they would start to think of themselves as dangerous. They would start to look at the galaxy the way the Concordance looked at us, measuring, deciding who is weak. The whole gift of it is that they do not know they get to be ordinary. They get to be a baker who is only a baker, a teacher who is only a teacher, and never once feel the green coin's weight. Because for almost all of them it was never there at all. The ones who carry it so the rest never have to. That is the bargain. I would not trade it. Let them not know, let them argue about small things and worry about the weather and raise their children in the light. That is what we were for. Hall nodded slowly. He understood. He had carried it too. I looked out at the gray water of the death world that had made me, the cold patient sea that had been trying and failing to break my kind since before there were words to break it with. I thought about Vessen's laughter, light and easy and sure, all those years ago. I thought about how it ended. I thought about the new species turning their great fleet away from a small world they had decided was weak, because one old watcher had been alive long enough to be afraid. They thought the army was the threat. I said softly, that is what they all think every single time they count the army. They count the ships and the weapons and the small visible face we let them see, and they laugh because by their measure we are nothing. Holt waited. The army was just the part we let them look at. I said it was never the threat. The threat was the species. It was always the species. The rest of us were always here down in the quiet, living ordinary lives, raising children, fixing engines by the sea, waiting, hoping we would never be needed. I felt the old device silent in its drawer back in the house, and for the first time in a long time I was glad it had stayed silent, not because I had lost my edge, because the word had done its work and no one needed to wake us anymore, waiting to be activated. I said, and hoping with everything we have that the galaxy is smart enough to never make us. The tide came in the cold sea, sighed against the shore of the world that could not be broken, and somewhere far above, scattered across the dark between the stars, the gentle species of the galaxy went carefully about their lives, and not one of them looked too closely at the small blue death world on the edge of everything, where the most dangerous thing in the galaxy lives, quietly raises its children, and asks only to be left alone.